Voice of Yoga.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about some valuable details to the suggestions made by Jesus to rise, because spirit is found before thought and above corporeal sense. In this episode, we will delve into the Christian Science suggestion of changing things into thoughts before exchanging the objects of sense for the divine idea. Lean in as we unbox the man, bull, lion, and eagle, which is what happens when the Zodiac is set with the fixed signs on the angles. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and think differently. Swami, the title of today's show is Attuning to the Immortal Self. So, Swami, we need to know is what do we mean by attuning and what is the immortal self?
Yeah, attuning in this model brings us back to what Mary Baker Eddy called at-one-ment, which is the idea of becoming one with the immortal self. Communion with the divine is what Mary Baker Eddy called prayer. Union with the divine is what we call Kriya Yoga. To reflect can be described as mind considering its own content. What Jesus called, I and the Father are one. Only one life, everywhere, always, looking at itself, as itself, of itself, and to itself. One being, perfect, whole, complete, and changeless. As it says in the Isha Upanishad, and I'll read it, the self is one, unmoving, it moves swifter than thought. The senses do not overtake it, for always it goes before. Remaining still, it outstrips all that run. Without the self, there is no life. To the ignorant, the self appears to move, yet it moves not. From the ignorant, it is far distant, yet it is near. It is within all, and it is without all. He who sees all beings in the self, and the self in all beings, hates none. To the illumined soul, the self is all. For him who sees everywhere oneness, how can there be delusion or grief? The self is everywhere. Bright is he, bodiless, without scar of imperfection, without bone, without flesh, pure, untouched by evil. The seer, the thinker, the one who is above all the self-existent. He it is that has established perfect order among objects and beings from beginningless time. End of the quote. And so in this show, what we really want to talk about is this idea of graduating from thinking about the divine self, talking about the divine self, and realizing there is only one perfect life everywhere, always.
To help explain this further, we have a soundbite from Gilbert Carpenter's Mary Baker Eddy's Her Spiritual Footsteps that we should play.
Today, Mrs. Eddy's demand upon her faithful followers is that they always go, as she did, to divine wisdom for guidance and consent in matters pertaining to the furthering of this great cause. She realized that unless students were weaned from her demonstration to make their own, they would cease to progress. The Master recognized this point so strongly that he said, in John 8 verse 21, I go my way, and ye shall seek me, and shall die in your sins. Whither I go, ye cannot come. In other words, if your effort goes no further than to seek to have me take you into the kingdom of heaven on my demonstration, instead of embodying the Christ for yourselves and gaining heaven through your own demonstration. Then your lack of understanding of the true spiritual method will be the sin of ignorance, which will mean the death of your spiritual progress. Both the Master and Mrs. Eddy taught that the time must come with every student when the help of another spiritually minded pilgrim must turn into self-help, where the Christ must be lost as something to follow after and gained as something to be embodied. It is a profitless thing to continue to seek the help of another in Christian science if it is continued beyond the point where wisdom would indicate that one should rely on his own efforts. Every gardener knows that the very glass frame which is necessary to give his plants their start and protection becomes a definite obstruction to the development of the plants beyond a certain stage of growth. They must be transplanted into the open. It might be said that there's a point at which we follow the Christ in another, a point where we catch up with him, and finally a point where we embody him. Jesus called that embodying of the Christ, eating his flesh and drinking his blood. It is as if a man, weak with hunger, were being drawn in a cart by an ox. Finally, he kills the ox and eats his flesh. Then he finds he has gained the strength to pull the cart himself. From this, we can describe the crucifixion as symbolic of the point where Christ is taken away as something that can be followed, only to reappear and come to life again as something to be embodied by man. It dies as something apart from man and comes to life as his own true selfhood. This might be taken as a warning to students of today that if they feel suddenly bereft, as if they no longer received the help they expected from those to whom they have been accustomed to turn, that indicates that the time has come for them to embody the Christ for themselves, which means to recognize within themselves the ever-enlarging spiritual spark. When Mrs. Eddy acted for the cause, it was divine principle that dominated her thought, rather than human opinion. This and this alone was what she wanted her students to follow. Follow me only as I follow Christ was her most profound counsel.
Yes, so in this show, we'll focus on this idea of progression. Born of woman, born of man, born of spirit, going from caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly. There are things we must be doing in order to initiate this process in development. At some point, you realize we have to develop the faculty that will enable us to receive divine revelation. Mastering these 3 modes of mortal thought before we can walk reason through this open door of revelation. So it's complicated, and for a lot of us it might seem confusing. But remember, if it was easy, anyone could do it. It's like anything else. If you wanted to become an accomplished musician, look at all of the things that you have to be able to do. And so to unlock greater human potential, to attain it. Say, for example, art thou willing to be made whole? Rise, pick up your bed and walk. It seems like it's pretty easy. But in this show, let's talk about what Jesus really means when he says rise. Or when he said, and I, if I be lifted up, I draw all men unto me. When you use the term man, it has meaning in Scripture. It doesn't mean the male species. It means those who have attained a certain level of consciousness. It's like when the tide comes in, it lifts all the floating boats. The sunk boat remains on the bottom. So we have to be afloat, be making conscious choices separated from the pattern of the physical body in order to be receptive to this level of consciousness.
Swami, so what would we have to do to get ourselves in position to float?
Well, we have to separate from mother. We were born of woman, separate from instinct, appetite, preservation, survival. This is why we say it's a process. Born again of spirit, union with the divine. Matter and mind must come together with new information. And it's not just an academic accomplishment. All addictive, compulsive behavioral patterns are unconscious motivation. And so we have to develop our psychological organs, separate from being reactive, emotional, controlled by preservation and survival, overcoming the fear. This happens when we join matter and mind with the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence, literally changing the reward circuits of the brain so that you're now using a completely different substance to validate the fears that come from the physical body. Like Mary Baker Eddy says, the chemicalization that happens when thought shifts from a mental material basis to a spiritual basis.
So this could be a good lead-in to what we were talking about in the summary, where we said we would delve into the Christian Science suggestion of changing things into thoughts before exchanging the objects of sense for the divine idea. Can you dig deeper with that for us?
Yeah, this is an important thing to talk about, especially when collectively the world is changing thoughts into things, practicing gratitude and manifesting abundance, manifestation, how to visualize and create, whereas to attune ourselves to the divine idea, we must be born again of spirit, which means it's a process. The initial stage of this is changing things into thoughts. This is the idea of linking the form to the mind, training the mind to serve spirit. And then, of course, having this mental landscape where you understand spirit is perfect, whole, complete, not some superhuman power that rewards and punishes, is a mix of good and evil. We must understand spirit is perfect. It's the only life that's here. Get away from this idea of being a good human seeking some kind of a reward for our behavior. This is human conjecture. We want to understand ourselves to be the only life that is here, eternal, perfect, without opposite, no longer reacting to the testimony of the corporeal senses, manipulated by fear. We understand ourselves to be the reflection of the image and likeness of the perfection of being. And we can't do this as a finite mortal being. So we have to graduate, put off the old man, give up the belief in mortality. And then, as Jesus says, rise. But then how do you do that? This idea of linking the form to the mind. To help us do this with scientific certainty, I really like to think about what Mary Baker Eddy wrote in Unity of Good when she quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Hitch your wagon to a star." When Jesus says to rise, just how far are we expected to go? Today we can look at some quotes from the Bible to help us understand the scriptural commands as instructions to be followed.
The first one we have is from John 5, verse 6 to 8. I'll read it. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. End of the verse. Swami, your thoughts?
Yeah, if you notice, Jesus didn't take him into the water. This is what he said, rise. After he said, are you willing to be made whole? This is an important thing. Are you willing to put off the belief you are a finite, separate, mortal being with problems? If we don't have this willingness to give up the false sense of existence, then we're not ready to rise. And as Jesus says, then we'll die in our sin. The sin is we believe we're a finite mortal being. We're hypnotized. We don't know the truth. Life is perfect, whole, complete. This mental material world of energy is not the divine creation. Once we have this willingness to let go of that false belief, then our thought becomes more buoyant. But like we're saying, how far do we have to go? And this idea of linking the form to the mind. In Kriya Yoga, we're not a human being with a mind and perchance a soul. We're spirit functioning through a mind and a body, which means the mind is not in the body is in the mind. And the mind is everything we can see as far as our corporeal senses reach. So the image of the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle becomes very helpful. We have 12 signs of the Zodiac, the 7 personal planets. We call them personal planets because up to Saturn, we can see the planets with the naked eye. And of course, if you don't have an understanding of what astrology is and how the planets rule the signs and how all of this works together, then it might be confusing in the same way that if somebody put a song sheet in front of you with music and you had no idea what you were looking at. But here we understand the astrology and how to employ it as a map. So the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle has specific meaning to us. When Jesus says rise, and I understand the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle to be the body of Christ, it gives me a mental landscape that makes this more comprehensive.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners will be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. We're going to continue with the Bible quotes that we have. This one's from John 8, verse 28. I'll read it. Then said Jesus unto them, When ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father hath taught me, I speak these things. End of the verse. And the next one we have is from John 12, verse 32. I'll read that. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. End of the verse. Swami, any comments from you on these?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is what we have been saying, that this idea of born of man, when he says, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he. This idea of I am he, one life, one being, everywhere, always. Once you start to move past this idea of separation and the belief in the many, and your thought is influenced by the omnipresent spiritual oneness, you lose that sense of separation and individuality rather than being individualized by the world mind, where we seem to be separate. The entire mental material world of energy is an illusion. It's a mental concept about life, which is eternal and changeless. And everything depends upon whether I am growing psychologically and spiritually, or I'm remaining in this underdeveloped state. where I never left home.
Swami, you always say, stop thinking, start knowing. How is that different from changing things into thoughts? Or is there a difference?
Well, of course, there'll be a difference. Everything will be based on individual level of consciousness and degree of awareness. So in other words, the difference between a caterpillar and a butterfly. It's going to matter whether you're born of woman, whether you're born of man, or you're born of spirit. Most of scriptures was written by butterflies. And of course, a caterpillar really doesn't understand the experience of a butterfly because butterflies have options, caterpillars don't. Same thing with the human in the adult state has options the human in the larvae state doesn't have. And you can't go from crawling around as a caterpillar to flying around as a butterfly without this middle piece. The chrysalis phase, born of man, where we separate from indulging, being careless, emotional, reactive, unconsciously aware, we then moved into a chrysalis where we cut off the instincts and appetites of the body and we became careful and ambitious and we developed mental functions which make us intelligent and not emotional. This then enables us to graduate to this adult state where we rise into spiritual identity. We walk reason through the open door of revelation, and we understand ourselves to be one with the divine creative principle. We're carefree, wise, liberated. So if we haven't developed the faculty that enables us to receive divine revelation, then when you say stop thinking and start knowing, it reminds me of trying to get email with a calculator. And if a calculator is all you have, then you're working with a concept about what you think email is. But it's really not until you get yourself a cell phone and you understand what this email really is. It's not until you learn how to control how you think, eventually stop thinking, and make your mind an avenue of awareness to allow divine mind to do its thinking in your awareness so that you are now reflecting the divine image and likeness. You are reflecting the perfection of being. And how would you know if you were doing this? It would be by the fruits, the testimony of your corporeal senses. You would be seeing the evidence between your human experiences and the divine idea. This is what Jesus was demonstrating. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. He wasn't fixing human beings. He wasn't fixing the outside appearance. What he was doing was revealing the truth. God is running a perfect universe. And what we are calling life is just a mental concept about it. And everything's going to depend on what is influencing my thought. Am I still being influenced by the world mind? Or am I under the influence of divine mind? Am I living in a good and evil world where there is sickness, suffering, disease, lack, and limitation? Or do I walk in the kingdom of heaven under the protection of the perfection of being? So in order to reveal this divine omnipresence, the progression that Mary Baker Eddy gave us was resolve things into thoughts. This process, this internal process, in Kriya Yoga, we would call that stop thinking. Once you have made this conversion, You stop forming thoughts and opinions based on information coming through the corporeal senses. This is what we would call in Kriya Yoga, pratyahara, sense withdrawal. You then make your mind an avenue of awareness for the divine mind. The activity of the divine mind, in that silence and stillness, this is what we call dharana, concentration. Then we watch, we wait, we listen, and we let divine mind do its thinking in our awareness. This process now is where we are no longer absorbing, but now we are reflecting. And because we are conscious of the divine creation, we are reflecting the divine image and likeness, and we're no longer under the influence of the corporeal sense testimony. Consciousness is experience. This is how we demonstrate the omnipresence of the divine creation. We are that place where divine mind is expressing itself through our awareness, and it demonstrates. If it doesn't demonstrate, that's your litmus test. As Gilbert Carpenter told us, Christ must go away as someone to follow and then reappear as the life of one's own self. This is the at one-ment we're talking about. Stop thinking and start knowing. What Jesus called, blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. He's not talking about grieving here. He's talking about dying to a personal sense of self. As he also said, if I, Jesus, go not away, the Comforter cannot come. Now we begin to understand the inner event and methodology to actualize the experience of knowing the truth. This is why Mary Baker Eddy put William Shakespeare's quote in the beginning of her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. There is no good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Also, I find it helpful to understand thinking is the mental material veil preventing awareness of the truth, the divine creation. As Krishnamurti told us, the mind can't free itself from its own creation. The Bible tells us to repent, which means think differently. So we now understand there are three modes of mortal thought and the operation of divine mind.
We have a passage here from Christian Healing by Mary Baker Eddy, page 14. I'll read it. The preparation for a metaphysical practitioner is the most arduous task I ever performed. You must first mentally educate and develop the spiritual sense or perceptive faculty by which one learns the metaphysical treatment of disease. You must teach them how to learn, together with what they learn. I waited many years for a student to reach the ability to teach. It included more than they understood. Metaphysical or divine science reveals the principle and method of perfection, how to attain a mind in harmony with God, in sympathy with all that is right and opposed to all that is wrong, and a body governed by this mind. End of the passage. Swami, any thoughts?
I still think it comes down to knowing the difference between thinking and knowing, the difference between thoughts and ideas, the difference between mental material duality and spiritual wholeness, knowing the truth, and then attuning the mind-body complex to the divine idea is not just thinking about, but the embodiment and the knowing that comes that there is only one perfect life, and it's the only life I am.
Swami, thank you for your insights on today's episode, Attuning to the Immortal Self. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages, you'll scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you could press that would further your understandings. And Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and think differently. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.